All right, we're a little late here, people. This video is not going to go for very long, but I just wanted to do a little stream for you guys. First of all, if you want to join this program as a guest, the link is going to be showing up in a couple of seconds. It's in the chat, so you can always check out the chat link. All right, it'll actually come up any second now. Why not? Hold on, I'm so sleepy. There you go. All right, so if you want to join as a guest, chop it up with me for a few minutes, we can do that. My PayPal is also there. One second. It should come up in a second or two. That's my PayPal finance info. Okay. And we're talking about why is it that Warner Brothers, now Warner Brothers Discovery, why is it that they continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over again? Um, we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you guys want to join in the chat or you want to actually talk and discuss this in some more detail, I have no problem doing that with you right now. I'm 45% charged, so I'm going to pull off to the charger. And I'm just going to prop this up a little bit. Oops. Oh. And we're going to talk a little bit about it because they keep on making the same bloopers, the same mistakes. And the thing about it is they're not recognizing that those mistakes are only going to lead to. Right now, we can kind of predict what would happen with their IPs because they've been making the same mistakes over and over for the last. Lost and Found is in the building. I want everybody to see what Lost and Found is saying. So, Lost and Found said, "Not able to come up tonight, good brother, but I definitely have some questions after that post-credit scene." Okay, cool. I guess. Oh, I'm gonna say this. You're not gonna hear me mention a certain movie's name, uh, because I'm done talking about it. I said that in my last short video, which was like 15 seconds long. So you're not gonna hear me talk about a certain movie's name. Don't feel how about it, but it is what it is. Um, but there's a lot I want to say. So let's get into it. And shout out to Lost and Found for that question. Um, some of the real awesome people in the Snyder Cut movement, man, y'all is just awesome dudes, really nice people as well. And I'm just proud to have known you guys. I hope I can be as nice as you guys are. But let me talk a little bit about Warner Brothers, or what is now Warner Brothers Discovery. Um, you know, David Zaslav says, things, and almost every executive when they first come on the scene, they say things that the fans want to hear. So it's not that these executives and these people that run Warner Brothers are not aware of what the fans are saying. They're very much aware of it. But it is that for some reason, uh, they go with a specific kind of agenda that they want, a certain outcome they're trying to get. And they've been trying to get this outcome for a very long time, people. For a very long time. Uh, since Richard Donner's second Superman movie, they've been pushing, Warner Brothers has been very consistent in trying to get a certain kind of outcome for their IPs. Particularly, I'm talking about their DC IPs, of course. I'm not talking about other movies and other things. I'm talking about particularly their DC comic book movie IPs. Okay? And let me just change location a little bit to get to a much more comfortable place so I can sit down. Because it is, what is it, 12:33 in the night, in the morning, sorry, when I was having this discussion with you guys. And I personally am a little bit tired. Okay? But I felt like this is a discussion that needs to be had, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So they've been making the same mistakes, and it's strange because you would think that they would wise up and try a different approach. Nope, they just keep on going back to the same old approach. What am I talking about? Okay, so let's go back to the days of let's go back. We're going way back in time to the 80s. Okay, in 1989, a director named Tim Burton ended up producing a movie called Batman. Okay, and that movie was tremendously successful because even though there were other iterations of Batman that were serious back in the black and white era before Batman and Robin, particularly the TV show series with Adam West, um, the iteration of Batman that ended up being in a movie was one that was revolutionary. Tim Burton sort of Burtonized his universe, as Tim Burton only could. Tim Burton came from a horror background, by the way, doing horror movies. And one of the actors he had Tim Burton had worked with was Michael Keaton. He'd worked with Michael Keaton, particularly we know him working with Michael Keaton on Beetlejuice. Now, I don't know how many of you guys know about Batman 1989. I was around at the time. I saw Batman 1989 in 1991. But nonetheless, I didn't see it when it came out. I was very excited to see it in cinemas because it was advertising, of course, on television in 1989. And the selling point was, when the ad was, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Batman. Tell your friends about me," right? So that was for those people who came up in the time of Tim Burton, that era, I was a kid at the time. I was completely impressed by this very mature version of Batman. I had actually seen something like that in the comics. So I didn't, when you're talking about like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, who had read comics, had read how brutal Batman could be. Once upon a time, I read a comic where Batman, I read it in primary school or elementary school, we call it, where Batman literally was beating a guy so bad he started to beat the guy's face into a paste. This is after Robin's death. Okay, so I knew how, and the Batman that we, that in that comic had very, very pointy ears, and the comic books they weren't always colored comics. That's another thing people don't know. Nowadays the comic books are really, I mean, the artwork is incredible, but in addition to that, most of the comic books today have colors in them. But at a certain point in time, comic books and also comics in general were actually in black and white. So some people don't know this. There's some of these things. These are the nuances I just thought I'd introduce to people. But so when Zack Snyder put out Justice is Gray, in a way, because Zack Snyder's all comic booky, in a way, he's kind of paying tribute to the early comics, which didn't have an artist who necessarily colored everything. You like a comic book, the cover of the comic book would be in color, but the contents of the comic book, whether it's Star Wars, whether it was Captain America comics, whether it was the Hulk comics, was not necessarily in color because it costs a lot of money to print ink in color. So I don't know if people know this. We used to have also newspapers, and there would be a comic section of the newspaper. And it was a great joy to just go watch some of the comics in color because most of the comics in the newspaper were also in black and white. And it was just this rare exception. Usually on a weekend, you get one little strip of the comic, inside of the newspaper. All the rest of the comics in the newspaper were in black and white, and one little strip in the newspaper would be in color. So we had Archie comics, the episodes. We had Dennis the Menace. We had Modesty Blaze. I don't think you guys know who Modesty Blaze is. Some of you guys know what that is. Some of you don't. That Popeye. They had, so there was the different kinds of comics all put into one newspaper. You had the comedy, just a little strip of comic, like a line of comic. Anyways, I digress. The point I'm making is that before Tim Burton revolutionized comic books, because comic book movies, he really did revolutionize, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that. Comic book and comic book movies or series or live action or animation, around the time of Adam West, around the 60s, 70s, thereabouts, was campy, was corny, was funny. I mean, you still had Super Friends was kind of serious, you know what I mean? They weren't trying to be funny. They weren't telling jokes and stuff like that. They weren't trying to be a parody, because in my opinion, the Adam West 1966 Batman and so on was a parody of Batman. I always felt it was a parody of Batman. It was kind of like Electric Company's, I don't know if you guys know Electric Company and what they were, but Electric Company would put out Spider-Man. And, I was introduced to Spider-Man through Electric Company, actually. Not through, Stan Lee's Marvel Comics necessarily. And, of course, we all love Spider-Man's suit. And, they had this little segment with Spider-Man. Okay. Anyways, the point is that Tim Burton revolutionized. So it was a campy kind of thing. Even Super Friends, even though they were trying to be, real serious with it, oh, there's Lex Luthor, blah, 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 and they talk in these kind of heroic kind of terms and stuff. You go back and you watch Super Friends. It's really funny and it's kind of wacky. This is the time of like, Scooby Doo, Scooby Dooby Doo, and all these fantastical characters that when you really think about it, it's hugely absurd what's going on the screen. But as a child, you'd be taking in all this stuff, right? Okay, so let me get back to what I'm saying. The Dark Knight Returns, that was done by Frank Miller, sort of revolutionized everything, right? But even before The Dark Knight Returns, remember there was the death in the family, death of Robin storyline, right? And Tim Drake obviously kind of set Batman straight, because Batman was going down a dark path, just like in BVS. He was brutal, and he was on the edge of moral bankruptcy. He was, seeking revenge. He wanted to kill the Joker, right? Anyways, so if you have ever read the Dark Knight graphic novel, that Frank Miller did, it really revolutionized everything in terms of comic books. Because here's the weird thing: back in the 40s and 50s, Batman, Superman were actually more like crime bosses. They were like mobsters. They were kind of like gangsters in the way how they moved, And then people protested that and said, we can't have our kids watching these things. It's like these guys are mobsters. They behave draconianly, And so Batman stopped killing people and shooting people with guns and blowing them up and throwing heaps of garbage on them, right? And crushing them and throwing them down into vats of acid and shit. And Superman, he stopped being kind of like a tyrant in the sense of to criminals, that is. He'd take up a criminal's car and crush it in front of his face, and criminals had to jump out of the car and shit. All right. So Superman toned Superman down. They gave him more powers as well. And with Batman, it wasn't just brutality, because Batman was very brutal. It's always been very brutal, actually. But I mean brutal to the point of he's killing people left, right, and center, okay? So anyways, the point is, we came out of that era, the 40s and 50s, and in the 60s, they dialed it back. So, in the 70s, we had 1978, I believe it is, we had Christopher Reeve's Superman. Now, before Christopher Reeve's Superman, we had George Reeve's Superman, right? George Reed's Superman. And of course, black and white. George Reed's Superman, stood for, the good values and the American way and stuff like that. But actually, George Reed's Superman was a serious Clark Kent. He was a very he was a great, actually, Pulitzer Prize winning investigative reporter. Okay. So George Reed's Superman was a lot more of a serious take on Superman. But again, a lot of people don't know this stuff. Okay. I'm now breaking it down. What most people identify with, at least Warner Brothers, I got to say Warner Brothers, because Superman was not always the property of Warner Brothers, by the way. It was property of DC, but wasn't the property of Warner Brothers. We'll get to that. But the point is, and by the way, Superman first appeared on television, not in movies. It was television. Okay, Batman first appearance was on television, not movies, television. Okay, this is very important for people to understand. And the first iterations of Batman in live action, he was, considered this weird creature of the night kind of guy. Okay, they actually introduced him as this creepy dude, kind of like often, because remember, Batman is really coming from Darkman. Okay, and the Shadow. Okay, so he's sort of a shadowy sort of individual, right? So there's a lot of things that people don't know about these characters, these DC characters, where they come from, their origins, etc., why they came about, and so on. But I'm doing all of this because what I want to come to, the point I want to make, is about Warner Brothers. So here's what's going on. So we have the campy Batman that appears in 1966. That's the 66 Batman, right? Adam West goes with that. Again, appears first on TV. They have their own little movie series. It's wacky, it's crazy, it's off the cuff. It's funny, it's light. Okay. In 1978, we had Richard Donner do a tribute to Superman, and it was phenomenal in its time. It was groundbreaking. Okay. Superman, Christopher Reeves portrayed Superman in a groundbreaking way. All right. Nobody had ever seen those kinds of special effects. The things that Richard Donner did, changed the way how people viewed things. And it had a great impact on the world. Okay, let me just go to Lost and Found's comments first, and then I'll go to David Tolson Jr. I'll explain to you guys what's really going on, and you guys will get to kind of understand what's happening, right? Lost and Found says, it's really unfortunate. WB and some of the DC fans reject the Snyderverse, even though those movies were the most profitable. It's insanity, right? So why is that so? Why is it that they don't want to work with certain directors? But mind you, I'm not finished. Like I said before, there's certain people who revolutionize the way our comic book movies are done. So Richard Donner was one of those people. Now, the amazing thing about Richard Donner's Superman in Superman 1978 is Richard Donner actually had an extended cut of that original Superman movie with Krypton and a little bit more events that happened on Krypton. Okay? Warner Brothers clashed with Richard Donner. This is why Richard Donner never completed Superman 2. He was kicked off the project. Revolutionary director, Richard Donner. I want you to understand what I'm saying, guys, because this is the inception of Warner Brothers, the early runnings of Warner Brothers in 1978. They wanted something campy, they wanted something light, they wanted something interesting, and they wanted to duplicate it in Superman 2. Richard Donner wanted to do a much more serious take, as did Christopher Reeves in Superman 2. This is something that, again, a lot of people do not know. And Richard Donner was making the movie like that. David Toulson Jr. says, I think it's ego. Nobody wants to bring back Zack Snyder because everyone wants to make their own mark on DC. DC's so huge. It's basically a mythology, and everyone has their preferred take on DC. No, not really. Not really. Like, if you look at it, a lot of people are sheep. A lot of people have a consensus on what they like about these characters and which characters they prefer in DC. But you have to understand something. Personal taste is cool. Okay, I have a certain personal taste in movies, but to stay true to what a character is and to bring out something more about the mythos of a character, I think is what sort of discriminates between someone just having a personal taste and someone wanting more, wanting to bring out more, to give people more uh, in their entertainment. I think that's the difference. And I think when directors and actors start to do that creatively and otherwise, this is where people in the business of entertainment restrict them and make things difficult for them because they think everything needs to be in a formula. If you look at today's music, if you look at today's entertainment on a whole, they're trying to make it formulaic, as if there is a recipe for success. And that is the problem with part of the problem with DC, and part of the problem with Warner Brothers. Okay, so Richard Donner was looking for a much more serious take on Superman in Superman 2, and Richard Donner never got to show his vision of Superman 2. What they did was kind of assemble something together many years after, but that was not Richard Donner's vision. We still do not know what Richard Donner's true vision for Superman 2 would have been, and that is a crying shame. So, but what I'm trying to show you guys is that the history of Warner Brothers is that they have had a history of going against visionary directors and giving them a very hard time, not trusting the director, even though they say they are director driven. They're always trying to go towards a formula. And unfortunately, because entertainment, especially in Hollywood, is a very cutthroat business, it's not surprising that someone sabotaged Richard Donner. And so Richard Donner eventually was removed from the project. But let me explain to you a couple things about Warner Brothers, okay? And what I've kind of seen from their continual failings. The first thing is a lot of the people who are in administrative positions of Warner Brothers don't care about the company per se. They care about their individual careers. So no matter what they tell you, they're really looking out for numero uno first. And as a result of that, very few of them are devoted to having some sort of visionary entertainment. They're always looking to copy something because they're looking for a formula to get their success. Now, I've heard several people on YouTube talk about the golden age of comic book movies is coming to an end. I'm hearing this because Marvel obviously doesn't have anything new to bring to the table. It's very funny because these stories, there's always many stories to be told. And of course, if we, even us as comic book fans, we can explore our imaginations on those stories. The thing about it is the storytellers must not be compromised in telling their stories. And two, the company, Warner Brothers Pictures, needs to be open to, whether they agree or disagree, to the directors and the writers and the directors and the writers being free to tell their stories. Okay, so, but there's something else I want to say, and this is the reason. I don't want to rehash things that people have already heard before. I want to bring something new to the table that you guys have not heard before. So, and this is why because I was talking to myself at this late hour in the night, and I'm not going to mention any movies' names right now that are currently, in the works. or are actually being viewed. But I want to say that Warner Brothers' biggest success for them at the time was the 1978 Superman. It was very successful. Richard Donner did a hell of a job. And from that time forward, certain elements in Warner Brothers have tried to recapture that kind of success with their comic book movies. Okay? Now, from Superman 1978, Warner Bros. Applied a campy sort of style to their movies, clean cut kind of campy style to their movies until Batman 1989. In Batman 1989, that revolutionized the comic book movie industry once again. Instead of a clean cut, kind of clean shaven sort of hero, we had a disturbed, mentally disturbed, preoccupied hero who had an alter ego that was, about it, getting results, breaking rules if it has to get results. And that was by 1989, Tim Burton's baby. But once again, Tim Burton revolutionized the thing. He had his own world and everything, the Burtonverse. Tim Burton couldn't do a sequel. He did a sequel, Batman Returns. And after that, Warner Brothers gave him the boot. They gave him the boot. Okay? There's a history here. And Burton was supposed to do a third movie with Michael Keaton. Never came to be. Michael Keaton, of course, was not going to do the movie without Burton because they had built a relationship for a long time. So, again, revolutionary movie for its time. Again, all of this you guys have heard before. None of this is new. But I am saying something because there is a pattern to these executives in Warner Brothers. And I'll explain to you what's going on. They're always thinking about the bottom end. They always think about the money, the finances. The executives don't give one flying hoot about the creativity and the type of quality of a movie. They care about, bottom line, they care about money. Okay? So we had, let me show you something. And it's a pattern. Superman 1978 was the highest grossing movie of the year. Okay? Exceptionally great work by Richard Donner. Still not his full vision. We saw his full vision later on. It was a longer movie because the intro was a lot longer. But suffice it to say that Superman 2, Richard Donner was kicked off the project. Superman 2 did not make as much money as Superman, the first Superman movie. And then Warner Bros. Came back with Christopher Reeve and did Superman 3. That was a dud. It flopped, and it flopped hard. And then Superman 4 was even worse. It was a bigger dud, and it flopped super hard. Warner Brothers going after a formula. They felt they didn't need a director. They didn't need Richard Donner anymore. Richard Donner, he kept on going against the grain. He's not doing the formulaic thing that won the first time. So they got rid of him. Right? Because they're all about formulas. They're not about innovation. So a visionary is not going to survive very long in Warner Brothers. Think of Christopher Nolan. Had to leave. Right? Left Warner Brothers. Visionary. Okay? They screwed him over with that movie. I forgot what it is that came out. Okay? Okay. Let's continue onwards. I'm going to show you something. Because there's something more to this than meets the eye. Tim Burton revolutionized Batman. Brought Batman in the flesh and the world he was in. And to this day, even though it's kind of dated now, if I go back and watch that Batman 1989, it's a classic. It is. If I go and watch Batman Returns, which is more brutal than Batman, but of course, Batman 1991, it's brutal times. It's not, it's not as what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as politically correct as today. But Catwoman's performance by Michelle Pfeiffer was still, to me, it's just the craziest performance I've ever seen. Still to this day, they say, "Oh, she was raunchy, she was cheap, whatever." I don't care what you say. It's deep end. What I mean by that is, it's edgy, it's risky. What she did, and you could tell she had to get into a certain mindset to play that role. And I've not seen a Catwoman as good as Michelle Pfeiffer's rendition of Catwoman to this day, because it's so risky what she did. She was so edgy, you know, and still had a sort of operatic sort of carry to it. And so anyway, my point is, the critics didn't particularly like Batman Returns. Who cares, right? Warner Brothers cares, because again, they're all about formulas. And so Tim Burton was supposed to do a third Batman movie. In fact, Tim Burton was also supposed to do a Superman movie. And all those projects were all again canceled because, again, Tim Burton was bringing a fresh take on Superman. He was coming with something out of the box, something different, something very creative. Because these visionaries, and we always have a clash between the creatives and the business people, right? Because the business people, their job is to do business. They're not visionaries. Even though we have guys who produce movies and even some who have directed one or two movies, you still have this short-sightedness to how to deal with a brand. Anywho, let me get back to it. So Tim Burton was thrown to the curb, right? Who replaced Tim Burton? Right? Who replaced Tim Burton? Schumacher, right? Schumacher did Batman Forever. Batman Forever was not as edgy, it was not as risky a movie as the two Batman movies that Tim Burton brought forth. The world was established by Tim Burton. Schumacher kind of exaggerated it, put a little bit more lightness to it and comedy. Burton has a very dark humor, as we all know. So Burton's humor and the way how Burton did his world with, of course, the musicality, the operatic musicality of at the then time Danny Elfman, sort of put together this soup that worked. And so Danny Elfman, I don't think, was on the project for Schumacher. Schumacher came out with a different, I believe it's a different composer. And so Schumacher's version of Batman Forever, which is still not the version that he wanted to do, because the studio wanted it more campy. They wanted it more less risky, more for the kids, because they wanted to sell toys, right? And they want commerce. It's always about commerce for them. And so the executives were pushing a commercial line. Of course, again, Schumacher is a brilliant, he's a brilliant director. He's a brilliant artist, and all you got to do is just watch it. The Lethal Weapon movies, the movie with what's the movie with what's his name? I forgot his name. The guy who went on a shooting spree because of what happened in his workplace and stuff like that. Schumacher, brilliant director, but he was put in a bind because his vision for Batman Forever wasn't what you saw on the screen. You get what I'm saying? There's always this clash between the creatives and the business people. throughout Warner Brothers history, and of course many studios history as well. But I'm just saying, there's this clash. Okay, so let me explain to you what Warner Brothers was trying to get at, if you haven't realized by now. And of course, Geoff Johns feels he can deliver that. So Warner Brothers is trying to get, they've always been trying to get that success that they got with that very first Superman movie, Superman 1978. They want the entire world, any age group and any sex, identity, whatever, to be able to watch their movie and really enjoy it. They want to give you basically a sort of an animated version, a live action animated version of what they do with their animated series. So they're trying to stay, because they feel only kids read comics. So they don't want their comics to be too abrasive. They don't want it to be their comic book movies to be too challenging, unless it's something that can be award-winning sort of comic, like Joker. And so the way how Warner Brothers has been approaching DC, and you see it over and over and over and over again, is they're trying to get to the point where they can get at as many people in a demographic as they can. And the formula that they think works, again, I tell you, they constantly go for formulas, is the formula of the Christopher Reeve Superman, Richard Donner movement. Now, Kevin Feige has been successful to some degree in pulling that off in the MCU, but that's because the people who like Marvel, of which I am not one of them who likes the MCU particularly, the people who like Marvel movies, there's a formula to them, right? This pathos and comedy. So they'll hit you with a joke, and then they'll go into some emotional thing, and then they go back to jokes, and then they go to an emotional thing, and so on. And this is the formula for most Marvel movies, if not all of them. And Feige and Geoff Johns are good friends, and of course Patty Jenkins talks about Richard Donner all the time. And her Wonder Woman 84 was an attempt by her to sort of explain Richard Donner, but explain him, keeping him in this time, 1984. And for us to see how far we have grown from that, but at the same time to understand the language of Richard Donner. So her attempt, which I gotta say is very ambitious on her part, her attempt was to try to show us, not just in terms of the period film, but show us through the technology of the period of the time, a reenactment of what this film would have looked like if Richard Donner was doing it back in 1984. That make any sense to you? So this is her impression of it. So this is what she was trying to pull off, which is extremely brilliant on her part. It's just the execution fell short of the mark. It's not like Patty Jenkins was just doing any old stupidness. She was literally trying to, the DNA of Wonder Woman 84, she had a great idea. The problem was the execution of it. Okay? Patty's not an action director. I wish, and I wish she had relayed this idea to someone who was capable of doing it. I'm not going to go into Geoff Johns right now. I'm just not going to go into him. Anyways. So this is what the executives want. The executives want a formula that would bring them their success. And they've been looking for this for the longest while. How to recapture what happened with Superman. So no matter how many revolutionary directors there are, they're always going to butt heads with the studio, because most of the people in the studio, they may produce movies and all that stuff, but most of them are not creatives. Particularly, they're not movie creatives. They're not film creatives. Most of them are not directors. So what happens is they're always seeing something from an investment perspective, and they're not seeing it from a creative perspective. That is one of the major problems. So because they're dealing with formulas, let me see if this makes sense, because I said before, there's something I'm trying to say here that is something really new. Okay, so they're striving to get a sort of, and CW kind of does this. Okay, CW doesn't mesh well with everybody, but the idea is there. It's to capture a version of the comic book IP that they may be dealing with that has widespread appeal. This is what they've been striving to do many a time with many of the movies, and they've been failing over and over again because they're depending on a comic book writer in Geoff Johns, who has wrote a number of comic books, to get that splitting image look and feel of their comic book IPs. So Superman Returns failed miserably. It flopped as well at the box office. It broke even, but it flopped. It was a box office flop. And the reason Superman Returns was a box office flop was because, once again, they were trying to do the Christopher Reeves Superman. They were trying to do a sort of generic Superman that they had success with in the TV shows and so on. Lewis and Clark, Superboy, and so on. So they tried to get that back on the big screen. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Brandon Routh was actually the continuation of Christopher Reeve's Superman, literally. And that failed. They then went on to try to do a Green Lantern movie, in which, once again, they're trying to get a generic version of the Green Lantern everybody's seen, whether it's in the comic books or whether it's in, and they tried their best to be as close, but that is not the way to go. But that's what they wanted trying to do, a generic version of Green Lantern. Most people recognize and know. It failed miserably. Okay. Again, they also tried to use the copy off of the Christopher Reeve version of pathos and humor, and it just didn't work. It failed. Then, after that failure, they stumbled, I have to say, upon Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan had been known for Inception and a bunch of stuff, good stuff. And he decided to take on Batman. And his take on Batman was, again, revolutionary. He, for the first time on television, live action or otherwise, showed the origins of Batman. And not the origins of Batman from when he was a child, but the origins of Batman, how he became the guy, like the Batman that we know today. His take was a much serious one. It wasn't pathos and humor, but it was a very serious, grounded take on Batman, bearing in mind the 9/11 backdrop. And that was a smash hit in 2005. 2005, I believe it was. Okay. They wanted, then Warner Bros. They wanted to do Justice League Mortal. That got canceled with George Miller because Christopher Nolan wanted to continue the story of Batman, the trilogy that he had, and that turned out to be very successful. Okay, a very successful trilogy. But Nolan, unlike the creators before him had a beginning and an end goal. Okay? He knew what he wanted to do with this character from beginning to end. And they went with him, and that's why he was successful. Whereas with Tim Burton, I do not know if Tim Burton ever outlined his beginning and end, or did uh, did uh, 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 Christopher Reeve's director, whose name just slipped me just all of a sudden, give a beginning and end to his saga. Now, Zack Snyder, he had a beginning and end to his saga as well, a five movie arc. But again, did Zack Snyder, spell this out to Warner Brothers? Probably. Anyways, going back to what I'm saying. Now, the thing with Christopher Nolan was, as much as his film was grounded, really didn't have any edgy. Christopher Nolan's not known for edgy performances. He's not known. He's a very, I think, conservative director. And so that kind of fit in. He's more conceptual and conservative director. So that kind of fit into Warner Brothers' general plan, and even though, Nolan's Batman was revolutionary in terms of filling in the blanks for Batman and some story of him. It wasn't something revolutionary. I mean, Heath Ledger's performance was revolutionary, but again, because Heath Ledger was a villain, it was okay for him to be on the edge. Batman wasn't so much on the edge, as you could tell. Nolan tried to show, the emphasize on certain things that Warner Brothers and DC been pushing, for Batman not to kill and stuff like that. So basically, Nolan kind of towed the line, even though he was playing with a lot of things. He sort of towed the line, so Warner Brothers was happy with what he was doing. Then comes Zack Snyder, right? Zack Snyder's the next guy. But before that happens, see, what happened was why Nolan was able to do what he was doing because Schumacher produced Batman and Robin. Exactly what Warner Brothers wanted. They wanted a movie for kids. They wanted a movie to sell toys. And that just backfired majorly, right? Batman, they were trying to kind of get the Adam West 66 Batman going again. And it failed miserably. What was Warner Brothers trying to shoot? Like I said before, they're trying to get a generic sort of version of the IP so that they can make money off of it. They want a formula. And they don't believe that risky and edgy and something pushing the boundaries and visionary stuff is the way to go. And that's what they miss. They miss that it's visionary things. It's things that people never seen before is what drives the product, not safe. Safe does not drive the product. The Matrix worked the first time. The other two didn't do so good because the Matrix was something nobody thought about or saw before. Superman 1978 worked because people had never seen that before. And if you stayed with Richard Donner, you'd have seen something that you never seen before. They never stayed with him, right? Tim Burton's the same thing. Tim Burton was very edgy. He's like a very edgy director, much more edgy than Christopher Reeve's director, right? Then you have Schumacher, who wanted to do something revolutionary, something different, and you could see his take was there, but it never got to where it should have been, right? Because they made it more a romance kind of thing, and it was the lamest Batman I have seen. Batman Forever, I was like, and again, Warner Brothers disrespects Tim Burton, kicks him off the project, kicks off Michael Keaton, and they're like, anybody could play Batman. No, anyone cannot play Batman. And they learned that really quickly because Batman Forever didn't do as well. And then, of course, Batman and Robin flopped, right? But they want this generic sort of character, with the pathos and the comedy this is what Warner Bros. Continuously goes to default with. You look at Superman 2. That's what they did. It made it even more of a comedy than it was the first movie. And we've seen this in sequels of movies. Sometimes people, make more comedies than anything else. Same mistake they keep on making because they're all about the bottom line being money. They're not thinking about visionary stuff. The audience really enjoys this and they're blown by it, then what does it matter what critics think? But they always think about the critics and all these kind of things because they're all about a formula, which Marvel successfully did to some degree, but now they're out of ideas and they don't have a place to steal ideas from. So they're in the crapper as well. But the kind of substandard products that are coming out from Warner Bros. Is because they keep on trying to push for a formula. I'll show you what I mean. So here they are again, falling down the same trap in terms of so Schumacher, it flops. Because Schumacher flops so badly, they flip-flop and they go the opposite direction. And they're like, Christopher Nolan, definitely, we're going to pick up this guy and he's going to revive Batman. And he does. And he's kind of safe. Christopher Nolan's kind of safe director because he's going to do a grounded story, etc. But he's kind of a safe director. He's not so visionary that, he's edgy and he's not Tim Burton. Let's just put it that way. He's not, Richard Donner, he's more like Richard Donner, kind of like, but Richard Donner is not as safe as people think because what? Richard Donner was about to do Superman 2 in a totally different way to the first Superman. They just, when they realized, that's a little too left field, we need more generic, we need more center. We don't want to offend anybody. We don't want people, So they want to make money and they want to make people feel good, right? So because of that, we end up with situations where didn't happen with Christopher Nolan. Unfortunately for him, he had a beginning and an end, and he made sure he did his 3 movies and he got out of there. He was smart. But he wasn't a guy that troubled the waters like a Tim Burton or like what Schumacher really wanted to do, right? So as a result of that, and even what Richard Donner was trying to do, right? You see that they didn't really affect Christopher Nolan that badly. Which is kudos to Christopher Nolan on walking that kind of line. Zack Snyder, of course, he troubled the boat from the get-go, from Man of Steel all the way down Batman v Superman. He troubled the boat tremendously, and the messages and the content is just nuts. Okay, to this day we're still unpacking Batman v Superman, right? Anyway, so the point is revolutionary. Okay, Zack Snyder, revolutionary director. Of course, he had some flops. He had Watchmen that flopped. He had Sucker Punch that flopped. Right? Totally misunderstood movies, but it is what it is. And so he came in. Christopher Nolan recommended him. He came in. He did Man of Steel. And in the second movie, they're trying to mess with his movie, right? So why? Because the critics didn't like Man of Steel, right? Zack Snyder rocked the boat. He shook the place like crazy. And he's coming with another visionary idea that, Zack wanted to do Man of Steel 2, but they accelerated him to BVS, whatever. So anyway, he comes with another revolutionary idea. And BVS doesn't perform as they expected, right? Because, again, they tampered with his stuff. Because they want the formula. Oh, we needed to be so much and so much minutes long because we need more people to come in and out. Again, not dealing with the creatives, not understanding visionary stuff. They tamper with the stuff. You see what I'm saying? Because what they really wanted was a generic Superman and a generic Batman. That is what I mean by generic Superman. A Superman that people commonly know about. A Batman that people commonly know about. Zack Snyder said, hell no. I'm actually going to teach y'all something about Batman. I'm going to teach you something about Superman. I'm going to teach you something about yourself. Both in BVS and Man of Steel. And so Zack came with something totally different to what Warner Brothers wanted. All they wanted was a little kick-up flick like Marvel. They wanted a generic Superman, generic Batman, and that would have done it. Right? Why couldn't they just do the Dark Knight Returns, man? Why did Zack just do the Dark Knight Returns, man? No, Zack had something totally different, and that rubbed them the wrong way. And then the fact that they got so much critical flack. Batman v Superman was panned very badly for no reason at all. Even though I do agree that Warner Brothers put their foot in their own mouth by restricting the runtime. Again, some stupid formula that they came up with based on Marvel movies. Executives and their formulas. Stupid, right? And in so doing, they sabotage themselves, because what is missing from these executives are visionary executives that understand the visionary directors. That is what's missing from Warner Bros. People who have actually directed movies, or people who've actually not just produced movies. That's not good enough. You got to be part of the creative process all the way through. That's something I like about Charles Roven. Charles Roven, he supports all these movies. Some of them are flopping and tanking and all, but Roven's still supporting, right? And that's something very impressive. Now, you have to trust your directors. And if there's a director you should trust, it's Zack Snyder, right? But of course, just like with Richard Donner, just like with Tim Burton, visionary directors, just like with Christopher Nolan, you're going to have other people who are jealous in the industry, and they're trying to sabotage you. And Geoff Johns wasn't part of Man of Steel, and the process with Man of Steel, he had limited involvement, and so he had an agenda against Zack, as we all know. But that's still not it. Geoff Johns pitched a pitch that Warner Brothers liked. Geoff Johns pitched a formula. Geoff Johns pitched a pitch that they bought into with Green Lantern. You want a generic hero. You want a hero everybody can agree with, not too heavy on the brain. It's not too much of a, it's not too hard. It's just simple to understand. You got to keep it simple so the masses, because the masses are stupid, and this is their understanding. So you want a generic sort of kind of hero, not too much story, nothing like that, and let them use their powers, right? So this is basically what Geoff Johns brought to the table, time and time again. He got these comic book looking characters, whether they're realistic or they make sense or not. And the same mistake Schumacher made, the same mistake that happened with Green Lantern, the same mistake that happened with Justice League 2017, the same mistake that happened with the Suicide Squad. They're praising it, and these characters look really comic book likey, but they're not practical. And the audience isn't that stupid. And it's not just little kiddies coming to see movies to sell toys. And this is where they kind of miss it. And so a lot of times they're trying to go for, okay, what's the common Superman out there? There's no twist, nothing. There's no depth to it. Because executives don't care about that. Right? So the creative process and the visionary take on things that revolutionizes things and revolutionizes the industry, they can't appreciate that. You see? And that's the problem that's happening with Warner Bros. Even to this day, even with Zaslav and those guys. They're falling into the same trap, and they're doing the same thing over and over again, which is they're looking at the bottom line. They're looking at dollars and cents. They're looking at a formula, some kind of formula. You heard Zaslav say it. We're using the MCU formula, right? They're using the MCU way of structuring things, and they're always looking at formulas. And you got executives looking at formulas, and then you got the creatives who are trying to bring fresh, new, different things to the table. You're going to have these problems. Because the films are going to be formed by committee. They're not going to be formed by the creatives' vision for it. And this is what we're getting filmed by committee. And this is what's killing comic book movies. Because people are getting disinterested in them. A lot of people are getting comic book fatigue because the creatives are not being allowed to do what they want to do. The directors are being overridden. Okay? And one guy is trying to monopolize the whole thing, which is Geoff Johns, because he thinks he's got what the executives want to hear. He's singing the tune they want to hear. Oh, there is a magical formula. You saw Marvel, we got it too. And this is what we need to do. And this is what they tried to do. Jeff Johns tried to do it with Green Lantern. He failed. He then tried to do it with Justice League 2017. He failed. He succeeded at doing it with Aquaman, not because Aquaman is a good movie in any way, shape, or form, but because he got the support of the Snyder Cut movement through Jason Momoa. And this is the same little trick they're trying to apply now. He even got some success with Wonder Woman, if you think about it. Jeff Johns got a little success with Wonder Woman, you know. But the real thing started with Aquaman. They thought, yeah, we hit it. We hit the jackpot. Everybody likes Aquaman, which is not true. Everybody doesn't like that for one. They just support it because of Jason Momoa. But a lot of people probably think that Aquaman's a pile of shit now. A lot of people don't go rewatching Aquaman all the time, right? You'll see people rewatching Wonder Woman. You'll see people rewatching BVS and Man of Steel, right? Now, you think about how Marvel kind of changed the game and created this formula, which doesn't work with DC. DC, it just doesn't work. But the executives, they like that idea that there's a formula out there, a magical formula that can get people interested in movies. And one of the things Marvel was able to do pretty well is the stunt work and their action scenes. So they could have a bunch of shit in between, and the action scenes, it's just generic enough, but yet just kind of flashy enough to pull in the simple-minded fan or the general public, the general audience fan. So a lot of people like Marvel movies for their action. They don't tell you about the story. They don't tell you anything about you think about it, right? That's the same phenomena that they tried to steal. They tried to do that with Justice League, then they tried to do it with Aquaman. Aquaman is known for his visuals, right? And the action scenes. That's what Aquaman is known for. It's action. Right? The story, who gives a damn about the story, right? Right? And again, pathos and jokes, right? Make them a lovable character so that everybody will want to come back and see them, right? So the generic character that's lovable and funny, right? We get it. So that's the formula that they try to use over and over again and get people related to this character and their journey. And they do it through the usual typical. And again, that's an executive thing. That's not like the creators would probably want to do something different. The executives, no, I told you lie now. Now we can't have that because this is what our survey shows, and this is what this metric shows, and this is what this metric shows, and this is what this metric shows. No, we got to use what it works, and then it flops, right? Right, because they don't take into consideration that it's about what makes entertainment good. It's not seeing the same thing over and over again. Now, some people are, they're not they don't care. They're entertained by just about anything. You know what I mean? There are people like that. DC brand got DC on it, they're going to go see it, right? But then you have those other people who are looking for something more. And when you say DC or you say Warner Brothers, they're looking for something more. Right? And amazingly, Warner Bros. Has put out a lot of great movies. Joker was a pretty good movie. I'm pretty sure The Batman was a decent movie. Probably not it's a safe movie. Let's put it that way. The Batman was still a safe movie, possibly. Right? They didn't really go for the hard R or rated R kind of Batman, which we have not had a rated R Batman, by the way. And we should have. Really, we should have a rated R. Batman's a messed up character. It should be rated R, period. We had Batman v Superman, which was rated R in the Ultimate Edition, but still, and of course, in Zack Snyder's Justice League was rated R as well, and Batman, it's like, I'm gonna go after to kill you, but he's not gonna kill Joker. But it's still interesting, right? But no, I'm talking about Batman is a rated R kind of character. If you think about it, if you really put some thought into it, you realize he's rated R. That's a whole other story for another day. Right? How many limbs he's broken, how many times he's broken bones and stuff like that. If y'all know the Batman from the 80s and the 90s, he was breaking bones left, right, and center. He'd be breaking bones, y'all. That's why y'all like so much BVS Batman, because that's the first Batman you've seen. He's not forced. He's very fluid. He's moving like a comic book character. You know, he's moving like an Arkham Knight game, and he breaking bones, y'all. He's snapping them arms and shit. He not clean at all. You know, all the other Batmans we've seen, even including Michael Keaton Batman, didn't seem capable of bruising people like that and really just wreaking havoc, right? This is the first Batman we've seen. And when we look at, say, for example, the animated Batman and how hulking and big and huge he looks, and we see this Batman, we're like, yeah, that's Batman. You know, and even Kevin Conroy was like, you know, Ben Affleck's Batman is Batman. You know what I mean? And it really is. He's so bruising. I mean, the stunt man for that thing. I mean, it's incredible how they do the shooting and everything. You know? But the point anyway is that Warner Brothers misses what entertainment really is. And I think, unfortunately and fortunately, Marvel sort of, the MCU at least, it brought something new to the table in a sort of way in how they could get these characters to interact with each other. And there's a place for pathos and jokes. I'm not gonna, you know, knock on that. And they've been very successful with what they're doing so far. People grew up with the characters and stuff, and so, you know, they're very attached to them. But quite frankly, they also did a disservice and dumbed down not just comic book movies, but also movies in general. They've dumbed it down. People are much more stupid, to be honest with you, and more accepting of garbage, that you leave the cinema no better than you came in. I always believe that a cinema is supposed to be a transformative experience. It's not just an escapism. In fact, I would prefer that cinema is not an escapism, and it helps us to confront or deal with certain issues in society today, and that's what I thought always cinema was there for. And so it's somewhat of a letdown, and it's quite depressing. And I don't understand why these executives don't get it, but trying to get a formula for success, the creative process doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. If you ever listen to Philip Todd speak about how they came up with Joker, it's continuous evolution, an evolving process constantly as they searched for the answer. There's no formula for this. This is something where they were searching and feeling their way through the entire creative process. And that's the way how genuine creative processes work. And yes, there's a business aspect to it, of course. But if you want to have a good movie, if you want to really have a great movie, and today, of course, the critics, they're paid to play, right? Critics are paid to play. So you're not getting a genuine critical analysis of anything anymore, right? It's politics straight down to the bone. So, you know, Todd Phillips' Joker, for example, was berated and people attacked. But controversy leads to people having to think. And people generally tend to either act adversely or accepting to change and to something that's revolutionary. Okay? BVS was pounded because it was revolutionary. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Even the theatrical version, I enjoyed the hell out of it because to me, I had never seen anything like that. So it was great. And even a lot of people, when they came out of BVS, they said, you know what? I don't even know what to make of this, right? Because they had never seen anything like it. And the point behind it is Warner Brothers has the opportunity to not play it safe, but to go with their directors and fall by the sword with their directors. It's kind of almost the latest hour right now. They've been trying to play it safe for 5 years, and they've only been getting straight duds. Whenever they allow the director to take risks, whether it's Matt Reeves with his idea of what Batman is, even though he wasn't as risky, from what I heard, as we thought he was going to be, or it was Todd Phillips with the Joker movie, where he took risks, and they came up with a Oscar-winning, tremendously successful movie that has now gotten the sequel. Um, they have to do that. This is the Warner Brothers way. But even though they tout that, they say one thing and they do another. They tell you what you want to hear, and then they do something opposite. And we've seen that with the most recent movie that's just come out here, which I'm not going to say its name. You know, the executives, and then of course even the lead actor of the film has been playing politics with us. Basically, they're telling us what we want to hear. They know what we want. They're telling us what we want to hear, and then they turn around and do the opposite. Right? Their actions are just the opposite of that. And so that's sad. But I understand where they're coming from. They're trying to get a characters and a character that everyone can identify with, but it's backfiring because their idea of what a character that everyone can identify with is based on a formula. You see? Do you guys understand what I'm saying now? So they think that because the MCU has been successful with their formula, they've brought in people from the MCU. First thing they started doing was bringing in MCU directors, right? We started with Patty Jenkins, who was she was a rejected MCU director. So we started with Patty Jenkins, then we had Josh Whedon, then we had what's his name? What's the guy's name? The Suicide Squad director, James Gunn, right? So those three guys were brought in. And if you guys can think of any the guys from who are from the MCU brought in, just let me know. But the point is that they brought these guys in and they didn't move the needle. I mean, Patty did a great job with Wonder Woman, but again, it wasn't in a void. Zack Snyder wrote the story. She did rework it a bit. They reworked it a little bit, but ultimately, in the end, it's kind of Zack's story pretty much she used. Once Zack was out of the picture, and let me just say, Zack's not the only great director out there. Okay, you have George Miller. You have a bunch of them. Okay, you have James Cameron. You have a bunch of great directors out there. What I'm saying though is directors that can take comic book characters seriously, Martin Scorsese, whoever, right, and directors that carry weight, produce solid movies. And Zack Snyder is one of those guys. He's been berated because he's had to make success, because of Sucker Punch and because of the first Watchmen, the theatrical version of Watchmen. I think people have been up and down about it, and especially the critics. They don't have confidence in it. But to be honest with you, he's been hitting home runs of late. Okay, he's been hitting home runs of late. And so this is a director who is revolutionary in his own right in how he does things. The Wachowski brothers, revolutionary in their own right. Well, they call it Wachowski sisters now, right? But even so, again, they were trying to do this formula thing with them. And so it backfired with the latest Matrix story that came out. Okay? You have to understand, people want things that are authentic. People want things that are real. People want things that are revolutionary. They don't want to go into cinema and unless they're committed to a brand or something. They're not. I mean, people are kind of dumb as a herd, but nonetheless, it's not just about going into the cinema with a formula that you think you can get people with. And this is what they've been doing over and over. And David Zaslav and his team are the latest casualties of that. They're probably going to not do too well if they keep on going down this road. Because time and time again, it fails and they crash and burn. They crash and burn horribly. What you need to do is have trust in the director's take on a character. Because what happens is just like with comic books. Different writers have their own takes on character, highlighting different things on the IP or the character. So, they're taking a gamble with the latest movie. They're gambling. They're definitely gambling right now, trying to push the narrative that the previous regime had been using. Because again, executives, they all think the same way. Money, 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 money. Okay, let's see if we can get the widest audience possible. But the widest audience possible does not start executives. And this is something you need to really just turn off your whatever they taught you in business school and really think about what I'm saying. You don't start with the unknown. You can't start with the general audience. When you're looking at a successful movie. You have to start with the director. You have to start with how strongly he believes in his vision. Otherwise, you're going to continue to mess up time and time again. From the director, you want to look at your fans. Have a seriously good look at your fans. And Warner Brothers knows what the fans want. They know what we want. They know. Ha, diggity dang diggity. Fandango, which is a offshoot of Warner Brothers, it's like a sister company, put it out there. Black Suit Superman, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Tried to tie the two together. To, you know what? So they know what we want. But they feel that there must be a formula. But in art, there's no formula. And the sooner you realize that there is no formula and that each creative project has a life of its own and must be allowed to breathe and grow based on itself and the director, you're going to continually crash and burn. And Warner Brothers is probably going to eventually be bought over by Disney, who's going to try the formula thing, and they're going to crash and burn too. Because it's a different demographic. It's a set of people who say, we don't want formulas that are going towards Warner Brothers. And because Disney's buying up all the real estate, it's making it more and more apparent. This is why a whole bunch of people are watching Netflix and a whole set of shows on Netflix, because Netflix is not about formulas. It's about letting directors do what they do. And Netflix is going to do great. And let me make this abundantly clear, if Warner Brothers doesn't step up to the plate and handle business, they're going to get swallowed up and destroyed. Maybe Disney will eat them up. And guess who's going to rise up from the ashes? Netflix. Netflix is going to do exceptionally well. Because Netflix is going into movies, y'all. They're moving into the theaters. Watch out now. So if they want to drop the ball 7, 8, 9 times and rotate through regimes until the IPs and properties are in Disney's hands, so be it. But just understand this. After those IPs are in Disney's hands, the loyal fans of DC who supported DC are not going to be there anymore. All your comic books and all your toys and stuff, they're not going to support it anymore. They're going to go somewhere else and check out stuff. That's the truth. So if you want to kill your brand and destroy it into the ground, fine. You're doing a great job with that currently. You've been speaking to us and telling us that you want to bring the reputation of the IPs up, and you want to bring up the reputation of the brand. That's talk. Talk is cheap. You gotta show us. Because guess what? Your regime will be gone, and we'll still be here. And we're going to continue the hashtag of Restore the Snyderverse. So it really doesn't matter. We're sitting in a comfortable position because we're the ones that supply you the money. We're the ones you need us. So whatever we feel like telling you, whatever we feel like doing, you need us. You need our dollars. And the formulas that you're doing are not working. They're not working. You think, oh, we just need to tweak this a little bit and tweak that a little bit. And we need to have a PR team. And we need to have these people say certain things that will brainwash the fans. We need to bully the fans and to do it. That stuff don't work. All you're doing is wasting your money. And you're shortening your shelf life because you're going to fail. Your movies are going to flop. And then after that, you're going to have to be cycled out, just like the previous regime. So stop thinking about the bottom line and start thinking about the creatives and substance. Movies with substance. Don't tell us about it. Show us that you mean business. Because that formulaic thing. There's no formula for art. There's just not. And you should know that by now. Well, Marvel seems to be doing a great job with their formula. No, because people are going to get comic book fatigue from them, which is what's happening now. This is why you got so many people protesting about Star Wars, about some of the TV shows on there, She-Hulk and stuff. People are starting to protest these movies and these things and these TV series on their Disney Plus because people are getting tired of the same bullshit. It's the same stuff over and over, and people are getting tired of it. They talk about comic book fatigue. You should never have comic book fatigue if you got visionaries in there giving you fresh new looks and fresh new takes on things. You never should have. But we're heading in that direction because people feel we need to have this kind of universal, generic sort of story. Well, okay then. We'll see how that works out for you. In the meantime, I'm not going to be watching any of your stuff because it's not worth my while. I already know what your movies produce. Your movies are pathos and humor. All of them. Including BOP, Birds of Prey, rated fucking R. Sorry about the F-bomb. Rated R. But yet, rated R, but dialed back. You're not doing a hard R. You're not doing it the way it should be done. Harley Quinn kills people. Yes, she does it, and she doesn't even think twice about it. How's she supposed to have killed Robin 10 years, or be there when Joker was killing Robin, but all of a sudden she can't kill people? She's breaking bones. Yeah, she looked a little savage in the beginning, but she hitting people with rubber, whatever the heck that is. Come on, man. You dialing it back. You're making the director dial it back. Because you want pathos and humor. And know that the characters still could be heroic. She could be anti-hero, but she could be heroic. And so we need to make her look good. You can't be dialing it back. Most recent movie is PG-13. That's supposed to be hard R. Hard R. There's supposed to be horror elements in that movie. If you want me to take that character seriously, because I want to know if this character trip out and go, to the dark side, which he does quite a lot, then I must be scared stiffless. I should be tripping. I should be scared. I should be, and that's the stuff that we're not really getting. They think they can take the formula from the CW, which has failed miserably, and put it into movies. So you're taking failing formulas. You're not even taking formulas that work, and you're putting it into movies. Because again, executives they're not creatives. Most of them are not creative. So it makes sense. Now, for you and me, who are fans that observe everything, this seems like a no-brainer, right? But for executives with all their little, all their polls and all their little data points and all their information, they think from a business perspective. They don't even care about the movies per se. They think from a business perspective. And from a business perspective, they repeatedly make the same mistakes. And it's sad. But you have to have creatives that are actually in those business positions. People who understand the creative process properly. Not just people who produce movies or produced a horror movie or two and it was successful. No, you have to find people who respect, enjoy the creative process, understand, so that when the risky situation has to be taken, they have to take certain risks. I mean, real risks, hard risks. They should be able to take it because that carries the characters and so on into new directions. They need to be more bold with it. They dial back. So that's the truth of that. And I thought I would share that with you guys. So when Zaslav's talking about Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, You're talking about generic versions of them. You know, they can't be too edgy. They can't be too. They can't be too revolutionary. You see, and so this is where Zack Snyder can't really fit in and speak the language to these people, no matter what. No matter what they say or what they promise or what scoop you heard on the inside, they're going to change their minds and they're going to go down that road, like I said, the generic thing, which is clearly what their latest movie is showing. They're literally following the path that has failed over and over again. They never let Richard Donner fully tell his story. So they never got to understand the full success that he was going to bring to the table. You see? They never let him finish his vision. Never got his full vision. They're taking a piece of it and they're trying to use it. And it's just horrible. It's just backfiring tremendous. And to see this repeat over and over again is because they're trying to use the same formula. Even though it's not producing results, they're trying to use the same formula over and over again. They're trying to find that answer that they think Marvel got. But they don't understand Marvel was doing that a couple years back, and Marvel garnered a certain audience because over time the audience started to identify with the characters. Right? The one that they really clicked with was Iron Man, and they built their universe off of him. Right? So that happened over a space of time. They were able to emotionally rope these people in with these characters, and it didn't matter after that. They could have put out any kind of shit. It didn't really matter. So, Warner Bros. Trying to do this with these characters, they're failing so many times. It's not a winning formula. It just isn't. And bringing somebody, executive from across from Marvel to get results for you is not going to help the situation either. It is what it is, though. I'm going to catch you guys later. I am Christ's Aim Disciple, a.k.a. Anson Phillip. And I thought I would share that with you guys. Somebody been still watching this video all the way down to the end. That's cool. But you have to be able to call a spade, people out here. And what's to come in the DCEU is anything but interesting to me. I'm disinterested in whatever is to come. The only things I think I'm still interested in is the Snyder Cut going into theaters, which they can do very easily. Whether they'll do it or not, again, Snyder Cut kind of goes against what they're trying to do as executives. So unless they wake up as executives and understand what's happening, they're probably not going to put the Snyder Cut into theaters, nor the Ayer Cut. Because both things, well, I'm not too sure about the Ayer Cut, but Snyder Cut is still edgy. It's speaking of things to come and saying this is what's going to come. So if they put the Snyder Cut into theaters, that is them saying, hey, we back this dude, So we'll see. I don't know. I don't think so. But in order for it to happen, we as fans have to just continue to be vocal. And may have to write out another regime. We may have to write them out to be able to see that happen. But we as fans are the ones that have to put the pressure on them. So let me suggest a couple of things that may have eluded some of the fans out there. And I think this is something that I wanted to say. One, we got to up the ante. We've got to work through every single social media outlet there is out there. And whether you support the present movies or not, if you are a Snyderverse fan, you should be using the hashtag Restore the Snyderverse as much as possible and doing videos, doing creative things. Of course, support Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, but I mean, and we may support other directors or not. But at the end of the day, keeping those hashtags going, bring Zack back, restore the Snyderverse, release the air cut, release the Snyder cut in theaters, Batfleck movie, etc. Keeping those things going is very important. And of course, the central piece of the Snyderverse is Zack Snyder's vision for Justice League 2 and 3. Now, the thing about Justice League 2 and 3 is that's it. After Justice League 3, Zack's done. He's not going to continue doing anything. Okay? We'll have to wait and see how things go with that. That's what Zack is going to be wrapped up with his Superman. But I don't know. I don't know how possible that will be to see these two movies in theaters. I think this is something that those two movies need to go into theaters. And that's what Zaslav was saying before. And then all of a sudden, he's not acting on those things. And he's behaving like he's walking back on what he said initially. And I don't know what the atmosphere is like there in Warner Brothers, how much control they have, how much money they have. But it's something that I always wish the best for any creative or any movie out there, but at the same time we have to accept reality, and the reality is there are movies that are not doing very well, and this latest one, as much as people are hyping it up and everything, and that's cool, it's not doing very well either. I'm just being real. I'm gonna catch you guys later, man. I am Carson Disciple, aka Anson Phillip. You guys have a good night. I'm gonna see if I can get some sleep, and if I can, that'll be good. Peace to you all. All right.